I was one of the Native American children, adopted at birth and removed from our country's Indian reservation system. I was raised in a small middle-class farming community, but was never told of my true American Indian heritage. It was still taboo back in those early days. The years passed, and in 1987 I lost both parents. While going through their personal belongings, my wife discovered my adoption papers and she began a search. 5 years later, I was reunited with my biological Lakota family, living on the lower Brule Sioux Indian Reservation of South Dakota. I am a son of two mothers and a product of two worlds that had collided, but I have an equal amount of love and pride for both. I'm Paul LaRoche, and the stories you are about to see are an attempt to share this true American story of a hidden heritage. This week on Hidden Heritage, we're going to meet Nicole. She is the former Female Native American Artist of the Year, the lead instrumentalist for the group Brule, and by the way, she's my daughter. Nicole and Brule have toured across the U.S. and around the world and have become one of the top-selling contemporary Native American music groups, with more than 1 million CD sales worldwide. We recently caught up with Nicole and had a chance to talk to her about her career.
My name is Nicole Summers LaRoche, and I am the flute player in the group Brule. I got started in music, well, one, because I grew up with a musician in the family. I, as a little girl, with my dad having studios in the house and everything, my favorite thing was to get to go in and turn on all the gear, or even like back when they had the bar, like being in the club and chasing disco ball lights on the floor. And, you know, like I think when I was really young and coming into junior high and stuff, like at that time I wanted to be a producer, an engineer, but that's what I thought. But even younger than that, I guess, like in music-wise as an instrumentalist, in grade school, because I wasn't really an athletic person, I started, you know, I sought out, I guess, like acting. That wasn't something I really was good at or that I enjoyed. And so then, I guess in band, when they have you try different things to keep you doing stuff in school, and I picked a couple instruments, and flute was at the bottom of my list of things that I wanted to play. So they have you try a couple different instruments, and flute just happened to be something that I could make a sound out of. So they're like, here it is. And then it's kind of like destiny kind of like makes itself happen at that point. You know, I didn't necessarily think I liked the flute. You know, then you take it home and you got to practice and you do school band, and I hated practicing. But something, even though it felt all wrong, something also always felt right about doing it. Some of it's youth, some of it is just, I don't know, I think like it was all those things of life kind of creating what it needed to create for this to happen. And so did school band, moved into marching band and school band, and then like in junior high, middle school, I started in the Greater Twin Cities Youth Symphonies and did that for a couple years, and then up through about my sophomore year of high school before we actually like the whole events of moving over to Lower Brule happened, so then I was no longer doing those things anymore. 25 years in Brule, and yeah, I've been in it the entire 25 years. Sometimes it feels like it's been 25 years. Sometimes it feels like it's been 50 years. Sometimes it feels like it's been 5. Sometimes in the beginning, you know, like you hope and you think, you know, like, you know, it's going to go somewhere. And sometimes you think, well, maybe, you know, at least we had that little bit of time and it was fun. And, you know, it's hard to say if you knew it was going to go that long, or you just kind of, for me, it was just kind of going. You just go, you go for the ride. But I don't say I go for the ride because it wasn't just like I had no intentions. You know, I think 25 years in feels like a lot now, but I'm proud of all of it and that it happened, and there's a lot of experiences, you get to live a lot of life in 25 years. Describe Brule music. I mean, there's a lot of music out there. Like, you can kind of find a word or something that describes it. I mean, some people say rock, but it's not really rock. There's times that it's rock. There's times that it's electronic. There's times that it's new age. I don't know. Instrumental. Instrumental is the easiest way to describe it because it's mostly that, but that's a broad term. It's sometimes got country feel to it. It's very hard because it kind of brings all these different sounds into it, but it's very much its own thing, I think, because it was trying to be more not about a word or a sound per se or a description, but just something that brings people together. I would say the music industry, I mean, it's a interesting question because in a sense, like, we never really were a part of the music industry. We were kind of created our own little world to be a part of, so in the sense, like, yeah, like, music industry didn't really see us, I think, but I also think it's a really cool thing to know that we created our own path. We created our own way. We didn't ever have to really, I mean, we did have a label in the beginning. We, like, nowadays, everything, once the digital age came along, everybody didn't have to be labels, and labels kind of fell apart for a while and had to rebuild themselves back up in a different format, kind of, to allow the artists to have somewhat more freedoms, but it's kind of moved back. But we got to be kind of like even unrecognized, but pioneers of that whole doing it yourself, and can still go out and make money and perform and have shows, and you don't need the booking agents and you don't need the labels, and we had complete freedom to do whatever it was we wanted to do from that point on. And even without the recognition or anything else of being some people who were like at the forefront of doing that, without even really knowing or trying to do it to prove it to anybody, that we just did it because it was the only way. There was no way with our music to go, and it wouldn't have been the same. It wouldn't have been the same music. It wouldn't have been the same band. It wouldn't have been anything that it became to be. It needed to be that, and I think it became that in the most organic way more than anybody else, because it wasn't even about music. It was taking the music out and trying to survive at the same time, and not willing to sacrifice your creativeness and putting out what we felt was right to put out. So, I mean, how the music industry treated us, if anything, not seeing us, I don't think it really matters, because we got to do whatever we wanted to do. It would have been nice to say that we were a part of that whole thing, but in some ways, I think it might have been a curse on us if we would have had all of that recognition and been in that kind of world.
Of all the interviews that I have conducted over the years, I've never really sat down to interview Nicole. As the lead performer in the band and my daughter, she has the unique perspective on Brulé's journey. I recently lined up a time for us to talk and started to unravel the history of Brule from her perspective. The interviews went on for several days. Well, I asked her to go back to the year when things kind of got started for Brule. It was roughly 1995. We had recently discovered my Native American family, had a homecoming, and been reunited and finally made the decision to move back to the Lower Brule Sioux Indian Reservation of South Dakota. It was a life-changing event for Kathy and I. But imagine what it was like for Shane and Nicole, who were both high school age at the time. Here is some of that conversation with Nicole. I'm kind of curious to get, because I never really did sit and talk with you much about what was it like for you. I don't know, and I know a little bit of the answer, but what was it like for you when we moved back to Lower Brule and set up our house and shop on the little house and on the reservation?
I mean, again, like I was definitely someone who was very much just wanted adventure and new experiences. And like, like even though we grew up like we were living in Eden Prairie, which is like a pretty wealthy suburb of Minneapolis, but we most certainly weren't the regulars there. But I don't know, like I just always was like wanted different experiences and I wanted to see how other people lived and I like accepted a lot of different lifestyles and things which drove you guys crazy a lot of the time. So for me it wasn't like most people I think would be like I know I remember bringing a friend there and they like up and left in the middle of the night because it was too uncomfortable or something. And I remember like
I don't blame them.
like but for me it was all just like I really liked to see where other people were coming from to gain different perspective on things that I think at that age I didn't necessarily have a perspective either. So I was just trying to find from reality, from real things. I didn't had a problem in school because it was like what books were telling me, and I didn't really see that as a way to learn about people today if it's books from the past and I don't know, like young kid stuff, I guess. And the more I understand myself and the better we understand people, I'm much more of em- empathetic person. Is that a word? Empathetic?
It is.
Like I like I like not experiencing, I don't know what the right word is, but I like understanding how other people feel and how it makes them react or why it makes them react or why it turns them in different places in different ways. And maybe it's things that I haven't tapped into to use my full potential with yet. But that was very much like what I was seeking then so it was a cool thing to be able to do, to move there. And you're like going through this whole thing of meeting family and, they're like brother and all this stuff and talking to you. But from my perspective, that was never like really a part of what I was experiencing necessarily. But I mean, we met family and they were introducing themselves and everyone to me was a cousin. That was weird. Like I was just kind of like trying to like understand that, but yet at the same time, not and just meet people and find connections and stuff. But also at the same time, it's lonely, but I was also never really somebody who had a huge group of friends. So it was still okay, I guess, but I still wanted to like call people. There were a lot of times I wanted to call people and be around people I used to be around because it was a very different lifestyle, like which was fine. But sometimes I just wanted the familiarity of what I'd grown up with. And
speaking of lifestyle,
so I go back and forth, going back and forth,
yep.
like.
And speaking of a different lifestyle, if somebody asked you a question and said, "Hey Nick, what was that like?" Describe to me what Lower Brule was like in your eyes when you guys.
So like, I mean, I get it's weird because it's kind of different, but it's not like, so like when we pray, like, right. Wealthy suburb, but we weren't wealthy people. So like we still, food and things, like we could, for the most part, get what we wanted to. When you moved to Lower Brule, which was in the middle of nowhere and like a 40-minute drive from grocery store. There was a little grocery store in town, but it was limited on its availability and stuff, right? But even then, like you could be struggling to even afford the groceries at that store. And I remember getting commodities, which I'd never heard of. And like, but for me, I was like, cool, like, free food. But it's still different to think that there's a program in this place, in this community that gives food and like to understand, and you're getting it, you're not just like witnessing it and to understand it or learn on a, writing a story basis, but you're actually like part of it. And we didn't have a lot of money when we moved there. And like to know that there was a program set up to get that food, but it was a very different reason than like a food bank. Like it was different to understand, but at the same time, because I was young, so you don't sit and think about it too much. But like, commodities and the cheese. And then like, cause I'm hanging out with all the young kids and like they're like partying sometimes, or we're out just going out in nature. And like, that was the weirdest thing was we like in Eden Prairie, we would go and hang out with friends and stuff and do stuff at lakes and outside. But in Lower Brule, there's nothing but that to do. Really, there's nothing, and we'd go out and do things. But you learn very quickly how much a brick of commodity cheese can get you because it's like currency there. Like I don't know if you were like I definitely like kids would if they wanted things or if they want they for money or whatever, like you could sell a brick of cheese and get some money for something else or for other commodities and different things, like that was an interesting thing to see and experience. And I kind of like that it was like different ways of trade as opposed to just money. You don't think about it till later, but it was definitely, I thought it was way cooler than just having to always hand out money for things,
Describe the little town to somebody, Lower Brule.
The town?
Yeah.
I mean, I just like a couple streets and like there's a lot of like there's nice houses and there's not nice houses. They're all manufactured houses for the most part, I think. It's like like 6 streets in grid both ways, probably something like that for the town itself. Somewhere in there's the little grocery store. There's a lot of dogs that are just like the local pack of dogs, which is pretty common, I think, on most reservations. Like wintertime would definitely see like some of those dogs frozen to the road that didn't make it or like stuff. I don't know. Like it's hard because, it's not trying to describe bad things, but I don't think it's things most people would experience or they would think that there's something bad about it or be uncomfortable. But that's, I think, the hardest part, I think, for people to understand what that kind of life is, because if you only come in to witness, still, you'll never get the same vantage point as if it's like your family or you come in and it becomes your home. I guess there's some people who come to work there and they're there for many years. Like there's a lot of teachers that were that way. They get used to it, but it's definitely it's kind of like a different world from what majority of people are used to. And even once we started traveling, there were a lot of reservations that were not like that at all and were very nice and had nice things and houses and some of it's what they choose to do with their money. Some of it's just their better locations where more people go to their casinos. But it's definitely, I don't know. Like, and one of my biggest things was how to make, like, things I've pondered over the years is how to make people understand that perspective, of coming from regular, normal American life, I suppose, and understanding what it's like on a reservation without prejudgment because of the things that you're taught, or because and I have a lot. Thankfully, I get, like, I guess I didn't, unless it was just me not paying attention, but I don't remember being taught a lot of bad things. I don't remember being told bad things about Native, but when it came to history, I didn't really like pay attention anyways, but I don't remember teachers saying anything bad. I don't remember saying much at all, but I think I was lucky in the fact that I remember one history teacher saying question everything and don't always believe what's in the books in one class. And that stuck with me more than anything else that was actually written in the books. I don't know. Like I can understand that some people definitely get conceived notions of things from either what they're taught or what their parents were like, or just what history has said it was, and how do you change that to make it different? And even when they go, when they go there, they're going to still view it from a different perspective,
So would you say that your experiences of your early couple years there on the reservation, did you carry any of that? Did any of that influence your performance or your performance style or your heart, soul? Did that influence any of that as you went on up into Brule?
Yes, but not in the ways of like necessarily, I think, like the people or the experiences. I mean, I got to live very free and do whatever like I want for the most part. And that's like a big part of where the freedom of my playing, just doing whatever, I guess, I suppose, like is part of it. But also I think just being able to really be out in nature and quiet. And I don't, like the quietness out there and the breezes through the tall grasses over the rolling hills. There's like a sound of it coming over and what it sounds like going down. But it takes being there a lot of time and for many hours in the silence and learning to enjoy it and hear something else in it. And without that, you don't really learn to hear that. And those kind of things, like just being able to calm and not have all the overstimulation of sounds and everything, I think made me feel freer to just do whatever I want to do.
That's cool.
If that is, if like I miss it a lot. I definitely think more years go by of not being able to have like years or years, multiple years of that start to make it go further and further, freedom further away. To me, silence, open nature is more, I think, gives people more of their soul freedom and that's why I think we have a lot of confusion of what freedom is, I think.
Well, that's a neat explanation of the tranquility of the reservation. You know, somebody
juxtaposed with the life of most of the people out there, which is not very much so.
Right. You know, a lot of our promo stuff mentions that you started out with the flute in a program called the Greater Twin Cities Youth Symphony. What was that like?
I mean, it's very much the opposite of what the freedom of like being out there, like and hearing things and getting something from an experience from your soul and feeling it and just letting it. And I had to have that training, I suppose, to know how to play the flute and to know like things that make sounds in different ways. But I wasn't. I don't know. It's a weird thing because like I say, it's very much a love-hate thing for the flute with me because those times I did not really enjoy. There's not many enjoyable. I liked going to marching band camp for marching band, but at the same time, it really wasn't about because I really enjoyed playing the flute and wanted to learn the thing, and I wanted to hang out with people and have friends because I really didn't have friends, like a lot of friends. I had friends, but I didn't have a lot of friends, and I don't know. I was just a different person, and so it was big. But there, at those things, you always meet somebody and you get to hang out. So it was more for me like to hang out with people and having like a little group of friends for a while that you do stuff with. And then I had to learn things, but whatever, like I just did that along the way. I don't know. It's weird. Like and flute was something that I could make sounds out of. And I felt kind of cursed to it because I didn't necessarily like it the way it sounded. I didn't want to play it by itself. I didn't want to practice in apartment complexes. I didn't want other people to hear me. It was weird. And like the symphony, like in the private lessons, like it was hard because it was all this really strict, like I learned things and now I look back and I understand that like, I know why they're that way and I don't think it's bad, but I definitely didn't like it as a kid. But I didn't really understand why. And I just, I don't know. Like I just didn't really like rules.
Well, you know what?
I think I just naturally wanted that freedom of like whatever, but I had to have it and I did do it. And I made it through things. I didn't always practice and I like always tried to fake my way through my lessons when I go there. And I learned the symphony songs, but I had horrible stage fright. Like anybody could hear me singled out and all of it. I don't know. But I just didn't. Like I did it and I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it. I don't know how else to explain it really. Like I'm glad that I did those things. But
well, just listening to you, I think it's, and I've never put it this way before, but because this is kind of a different kind of a conversation we're having, but it sounds like it took both of those experiences. In other words, it took your discipline with the Greater Twin Cities Youth Symphony and actually learning the craft of the instrument, and then the freedom of the reservation and kind of discovering your own spirit and soul and stuff to come up with the Nicole sound.
Well, but then, like now that I'm thinking about the one thing, my favorite thing about the symphony itself, and not just like learning the flute or anything else, the one thing that I absolutely loved about being in the symphony was being in the middle of the symphony while we're playing. And even though sometimes I wasn't playing, but the one thing I loved learning and what it taught me was to listen in all directions. So like of listening, like when you hear the trumpets coming from behind you and like when those frequencies are, and this is how I interpreted it. I don't know if like the conductor always said this way, but this is what it started to make sense for me is like, I'd feel their frequencies, the vibrations of their instruments coming over. And when you're supposed to come into that part and your sound goes up in the air and connects to those frequencies where it's supposed to at whatever volume level and intensity and attack of the notes and things. And it's like this it's like this 3-dimensional sphere of sound that you put your sounds up into. And like, I could visualize the way they were all like bouncing and connecting and like getting smaller wavelengths and bigger wavelengths and like hearing it all like mixing together and making this like spherical sound. Like
Wow.
learning how to understand that, like that was my favorite thing about it. Like I didn't take from the technicality of things, but it's like the volumes and the swells and the attacks and like you've seen those visual frequencies and or like closing your eyes and be able to see them and hear them coming from behind or around you or to the side and you're seeing them sweep and you join in when it sweeps past you or when you're supposed to and all these different things like that. Like
well, that description right there would make people want to get into a symphony because, not many people get to sit.
Not many people would be playing, I don't think.
No, but now think about that. Not
They'd
many
be sitting in there waiting for everyone else to, or selling experiences to just sit in the middle of the symphony. As opposed to out in the audience, but like be in the middle of it in this section and hearing those things, like that would be cool.
Yeah. Well, then even past that, though, you're contributing to that sound by playing your instrument. So it's a different, that's pretty cool. I never thought about it that way, but very few people get that experience of sitting in with a large group.
I don't think people always necessarily look at things that way too. Like when you get your teacher and if you have your parents' expectation to be perfect and all these things, like you kind of like that all gets stifled and it's more about technicalities. And I understand technicalities need to be there too. But like when it's all that, and I have respect for it and stuff, but it's like when it's only that, I think that takes away from a big part of what we make sound for as human beings, like. By being independent and like some of the struggles is you don't get into the same kind of gigs or getting into gigs at all. Even if you are like a lot of those things, like I think a lot of fans would understand it's not like a band can just roll up into town and say, hey, we're just going to play in this town and find a place to show up and play. It doesn't quite work like that. And then with us, even you have to prove like that you're going to work, and for us, it was really having to find things that did work, and it wasn't the traditional kind of venue. And so, we somehow start getting malls to let us come in and play in a mall, which is funny because, like pop stars did it like in the 80s and early 90s and stuff. So you would think that would be really weird, but it worked. And, I think the good thing for us at the time was the economy was good because the only way we survived we weren't a paid act to be at these places. You had to sell CDs and that's how we survived. So people would buy CDs. They liked it. And here I'm just this kid and we're just playing this music and in a mall, and it's not the typical kind of music you would think or hear, and people would just buy it, and people really gravitated towards it because I think they really felt what it was we were trying to do. And it wasn't just trying to sell a product. It wasn't trying to sell a packaged thing that formulated that people are going to find a catchy rhythm or a tune. It was really like they felt what we were trying to say and do, or they did like it musically, but they think maybe they liked that it wasn't a conformed kind of a sound. And so, finding places to play wasn't an easy thing, but you gain a little bit more respect for yourself, I think, when you pave your own way and make these art festivals and these things that most people wouldn't normally do. We weren't at music festivals. We were at art festivals and selling a lot of CDs, and we weren't on the stage doing a concert. We were playing all day like an art vendor. And, in a sense, like we've created our own path, our own venues, our own, which in turn later on leads to bigger things. But still, you have to pave your own way and you have to work hard. Yeah, my instrument, no. It's a flute. It's something that makes sound with air, the same as a traditional flute does. Does it fit in? No, it's not a traditional instrument to the native culture. But because that's what I grew up playing, and, if you look at traditional life and when they had a flute, if it was used as a courting instrument, it's what they had. And it's what, at that time, the men would pick up to court the women. There were flutes used for different purposes, same as non-traditional flutes. Like a fife was used to lead a marching military group and tell them what they're supposed to do, different actions. Flutes were used for, instruments of all kinds were used for different things. it didn't make sense to just learn about that I am a Native American and pick up a traditional flute. When we're trying to like be true to ourselves, it made more sense to keep the flute that I learned and take on the idea of what a traditional flute was, and to play your feelings and to really try to be connected with air and sounds and people and make them feel something. And to me, I think you can do that with a classical flute as well. And I was like, all the things they told me not to do on a classical flute, if I did those things, it kind of had that native sound. And I still didn't want to just make it sound exactly like a native flute. I wanted my own thing. So I think by trying to really remain true to myself along with the culture and not just ripping it off and taking a flute and saying, oh, look, well, now I can play this well. Sure, I could be a technical, just random flute player, but I'm somebody trying to be a real person and say my feelings through an instrument. The future for Brule, I hope that we can find new stories to tell, new inspiration for sounds, new directions to go, new kind of venues to reach more people. I think that, these times right now, people got a whole different perspective of the culture and of the people and of the struggles and the things going on. Even from when we started, it's completely different, and in some sense, I think that people really knew more back then, and then it kind of like went into hiding, and now it's like way more light in a completely different way, in a more honest way, in a less like, not fantasy, but in a just more real way of what things are. So I think in the future for us that we can use that as another turning point for either our sound or our message, or that the people that we can reach in a different way. I had 2 dogs, Charlie and Guinness, and they were upstairs with him while we were watching the show and making sure everything was going okay. And I think Joe was on his phone, we're both like on our phone, and I start hearing I hear this oh my gosh, oh ha ha, like all this laughing like happening in the audience, and all I hear is them talking. I look up and I see this little dog run out onto the stage, jumps up to Bill, puts her paws, and our dog had run out, somehow gotten out of the apartment, passed up everybody, missed everybody, ran out onto the stage, I'm sure looking for us, and went up to Bill. Bill didn't even realize at first, turned around and saw her going away. And so, yeah, and I think it was being filmed at the time too, I can't remember, but yeah, my dog escaped the apartment and ran out onto the stage during Whispering Bill's show. Loved doing those shows and had so much fun and all the people, but it was really cold up there, and a flute doesn't like cold. So, you can't wear gloves, and I've done marching band in cold, but when you got a lot of flutes together, they all eventually sound in tune. One flute in a music sounds very out of tune. So we always had to have a propane heater tank thing next to me so I could try and keep my flute warm. When I'm playing it, it's warm. You put it down, it gets cold. When you play it, it gets warm. And so it was so those were difficult in the sense of instrumentally difficult. There's and with Jade, even though I think a lot of people would think that her journey and experience and stories and everything would be the same as mine, and they're completely different. And the things that she's contributed and added with us is very different than and everybody that's come in and gone adds their own part and it's the cool thing about Brule is it evolves and it changes, and the core family being there, everybody brings in something. And Jade, she really helped keep me grounded when I, could have been going all over the place, and have her as part of this and bringing her in. And she'd always stand next to me and pretend to play a flute, and before she learned how to dance and everything, and I think people really enjoyed seeing that. After all these years, I do appreciate all the fans and all the people who have come and all the people that have traveled and come to see us, and they continue to buy our music, which is really still the only way that we get supported. I mean, nowadays we do shows where, we get paid and stuff, but it's still very difficult to survive for us now as a musician because it's different these days in the digital world. And I think my biggest thing that I want people to understand is that, we're all human. And that's our message with Brule, but it needs to go deeper. It needs to go deeper than the music. It needs to go deeper than the culture. And we stay out of that's why we stay out of all those things. But somehow I think that sometimes in times we get lost on those things. And, I think that I just want people to appreciate what everybody has to give.
Thank you for joining us this week. I'm Paul LaRoche, and you've been watching Hidden Heritage.